Hi, my name is April Irvin, spiritual life coach at aprilirvin.com. And when I was presented with this question about how race has affected my life, I really had the opportunity to contemplate and think about that because race has most definitely had a very significant impact on my life. I grew up in the 70s and I grew up in Indiana. I grew up in Indianapolis. And so early on in my life, I actually had good experiences with race. I went to a very diverse elementary school. Now, mind you, diversity in Indiana in the 70s consisted of African American and white. However, it was very diverse from the perspective of where I grew up. And in addition to that, when I was younger, my best friend was a Jewish girl. So I felt like I had the rainbow of friends and connections when I grew up. As I got a little bit older, my experiences began to pretty significantly change, and it didn't take long for that to happen. It actually happened, the most significant I remember, in the third grade. And my friends and I, my African American friends and I, were playing in a park near my home, near a local university. And we were just doing our normal, enjoying ourselves. And we had three boys come up to us wanting to join in with us. And my friends teased them a little bit and chided them that they could not play with us. They were three white boys. And so the boys left the area and went back across the canal. And not too long after that, we heard a sudden barrage of pow, pow, pow. And we really did not know exactly what that was. And so what we saw when we turned around were the three boys, in addition to two men, running towards us and shooting at us with guns. And so clearly we were petrified, and we literally ran all the way home back to my home and told my parents what happened. And my parents did whatever they could. They called the university police. And the police basically told us there was nothing that they could do about it. They just recommended that we probably not go back to that park. And so the context of that situation is the university that I grew up near actually bordered a town, a small town right in the midst of my city, where it was very much known that if you were African American, you did not go to this area. There were actually issues and significant issues and cases where African Americans were severely harmed by going into this area. So we knew not to go into this area. And it just turns out that day, the canal that we were playing near bordered that part of town. And so that honestly left a really kind of petrifying fear within me. And I also realized it was that point where things shifted for me, and the realization that I was different because I was Black. I was different based on my skin color, and although my friends were of different races, I was different because I was African American. And I also realized in retrospect, and God has helped me realize, that also placed a pretty severe anger within me towards white people. That I held for many, many years. And it just shifted me so dramatically. And so my friendships continued, but something in my spirit shifted. And then I had other experiences growing up and going different parts of my hometown and being called the N-word and being treated differently, or being followed around in stores and not really understanding why security was following around me around in stores. And so all those things really sat in my psyche, and they impacted me a great deal because it began to shift, and I did not trust interacting with individuals of other races for a very, very long time. It really shifted my perspective. And what that taught me, and what God helped me understand, is that a lot of times the things we experience as in our childhood and in our youth can really shift pretty dramatically our lives for a very, very long time. And so that is something that sat in my spirit for a long time. It's something I will never forget. It's actually something I've written about in a blog because it was something that I needed to process. Even at the age of 44, it still impacted me because last year, God guided me to actually go to that part of town. And interestingly enough, as a full grown adult at the age of 44, when I got that guidance in my spirit, I was again petrified. I was afraid to actually go to that part of the city, knowing in my intellectual mind that things had dramatically changed but in my spirit, it had not changed. And so, because God does not give the spirit of fear, I pushed through the fear and I heeded God's guidance. And I actually drove through that part of town. And God guided me to drive through that area very, very slowly. And He was speaking to my spirit as I was driving. And so I drove around. And what God wanted to show me is that those people were no different than I was, and that also it had been 30 years and things had dramatically changed very, very significantly. And it was just an interesting experience for me, recognizing that even as an adult, that fear and that tragic situation that I experienced still sat in my psyche. And as I was driving, there was a couple walking down the street. I didn't see many people out. I was just driving and listening to God's guidance while I was driving. And as I continued my drive, there was a couple that was walking down the street. And interestingly enough, that fear and that angst and that protection came up in me immediately, because I did not know how I would be received. And so as I was driving, I drove past, and as I was approaching the couple, it was an older couple, older white couple, they waved at me. And immediately God spoke to my spirit and said, April, they are all my children. They did not mean any harm. And so just hearing that from God and seeing these individuals and seeing their heart helped me to heal tremendously from a tragic, traumatic experiences that I had as a child in the 3rd grade. And so having the opportunity to heal from that experience and having the opportunity to really open my heart to love and recognize that every single person on this earth is a child of God. It does not matter what race you are, has blessed me tremendously. And so now what I am able to do, and I often ask God to help me to look at people from His eyes and not my eyes. And so God blessed me with such a tremendous healing to heal those wounds of racism that have been with me for so many years. And I'm so very grateful for His gift of doing that. And I'm so very grateful that I can look at my brothers and sisters in Christ, no matter what they look like, no matter what race they are, and what experiences they've had in their lives. And I can truly have that unconditional love for them that God has placed in my spirit. So I'm grateful for that. And I pray that experience for anyone else who has had those wounds of racism in their spirit over their lifetime. Take care.